Okay, good morning. We have Masechet Pesachim, a mistake here. Daf Tet. A lot of very interesting cases about cases of certainty and doubt. We'll go through them and see them one by one, talking about weasels moving things in and out, and then what happens. You have a case of certainty, and then a doubt afterwards. Does that fix the certainty? So a lot of different cases from all over the place. So let's go right into the first one. The last thing we saw on the previous stuff was the phrase Hilchata Kevate de Shmuel, and so even though there it says halacha is like Shmuel, Rambam does not, and we did check the manuscripts and found that the Yemenite manuscript does not have this line. Several manuscripts, only one manuscript actually does. So this is clearly a later edition, and therefore probably from the Geonim, and therefore for Rambam not authoritative. All right, we'll see some more interesting manuscript items today too. All right, we start with the second Mishnah of the Masechet. En chosheshin shema gerera holda mibayit lebayit umimakom lemakom. Dimken mechaser lechaser ume'ir la'ir and ladavar sof. Is we do not have to worry after we do bidikat hametz. And we know this room is clean, right? We don't have to worry now that maybe a mouse came and dragged some chametz from my kitchen where I'm keeping the chametz and brought it to the bedroom which I already cleaned. Because if you're going to worry about that from one room to the other, and then you have to worry from one house to the other, from one courtyard to another, from one city to another, and you're going to have to keep on doing bidika in an endless cycle. This is like, the video of the person trying to wash his hands because he's afraid he has a virus and he's got to wash his hands, but then he touches the doorknob, he has to wash again, he touches the towel thing, he has to wash again, right? There's no end to it. Okay, this is very interesting Mishnah because it's actually giving a principle of how to deal with uncertainty and doubt. Happens to be a new book just came out about this very topic by Moshe Halbertal. It's called The Birth of Doubt, and showing how in Dead Sea Scrolls they never write anything about cases of doubt. They remove themselves and they have to try to achieve some kind of level of perfection as if that would be possible. But the rabbis don't do that. They don't make believe that you can ever be perfect. Instead, they confront doubt and uncertainty head on, and they create rules and systems of how are we going to deal with it. And they recognize that there has to be some limits. So we'll check a room and we don't have to worry about the distant possibility that a mouse, while I wasn't looking, came and took a piece of chametz and brought it back to the room, right? Because it would be simply impossible to live that way. All right, good. So very interesting Mishnah, and let's see how the Gemara will develop it. Ta'ama de la hazena dishkal. Ha hazena dishkal hashinan uba'e bedika. So the Gemara makes an inference and says, you see, the reason that we don't worry about a mouse taking something from one to the other is because we didn't see it. So we assume that it didn't. But what if we do see it, right? I have my 10 pieces of chametz that I found. I'm keeping them till tomorrow. And all of a sudden I see a mouse take one and run away. Well, in that case, I have to do bidika of the house again because I know that a mouse took it away and moved it somewhere else. Okay, so that's with that assumption, right, that you do have to check. Now we're going to question that. The question is, why do I have to do bidika? I know that the mouse took a piece of bread out of the room, but maybe he ate it. It's not for sure he deposited it under the bed, under the couch somewhere, right? Maybe it's eaten. So why do I have to worry about it? And now we're going to quote a Mishnah. This is Mishnah Masechet Taharot. It's going to get a little bit gory, so I hope you finish breakfast. So that's a trigger warning. Mi lo tenan, medorot hagoyim temein. Ve'chama yisheh b'mador, v'yeh hamador sarich betika, 40 yom. ואף על פי שאין לו לאישה, בכל מקום שחודה וחזיר יכולים להלוך, אין צריך בדיקה. The Mishnah is talking about if you acquire the residence that was a Gentile was in that residence. A goy was in there, and we consider it tameh. Why? Because we suspect that when this goy was living there, the women living there may have had a miscarriage. And what did they do with the fetus? They have a tendency to bury it under the floor of the home. And so there could be corpses underneath there. And so you have to worry about that, and you have to check. You have to do bidikah when you move into a residence that was once owned by non-Jews before you. Now, how long do they need to be there so they have to worry? Answer is 40 days. Why 40 days? Because for the first 40 days of pregnancy, whatever they may miscarry is not considered a fetus. It's just a tissue. It's not developed. And so you don't have to worry about that being tameh. From 40 days and on, they're living there for 40 days. I mean, it's true, she could have been pregnant before she moved in, but we have limits here too. So if they only live there for a few days, I mean, otherwise every hotel room you'd ever go into, you'd have to check. I mean, of course, we don't have dirt floors, so we don't have to worry about this whole halacha very much, right? But in those days, they had dirt floors. And so we, maybe this was a practice of other nations that they would bury under the floor.
Okay, it's a quick question. I thought according to Goyim, there's different of Tum'ah Tahara, different classifications. In other words, Yehudi will worry about Tum'ah Tahara, but Goyim don't follow that rule, so why would we be concerned?
Right, that's a good question. What is the status of Tuman Tahara of non-Jewish bodies? Even though they're not Tameh of Ohel, everything around, but if you actually touch them, so that's complicated. I don't want to get into all the complications now, but there's some level of Tumah of this of this body of the fetus. Okay, now even if the person's not married, it's just a single guy, we still worry maybe a woman came to visit him and miscarried while she was there. However, if it's a place where there are mice or pigs, chuda, we actually translate it as a marten or a weasel. If there are some animals there, then you don't have to check, because we assume that the animals went sniffed out and ate those that fetus that was miscarried, and so there's no more tum'ah there, and you don't have to worry about it. Okay, I told you it's going to be a little gory. All right, what's our point? Our point is that when there are animals around and they take something, we assume that they eat it. And therefore, in our Mishnah, even if we see a mouse, the mouse took some chametz and took it to the other room, we should assume that they ate it, and we don't need to do bidikah. And so that goes against the inference we had from the Mishnah, because the Mishnah only talks about a case where we assume that the mouse did not come. Why do you have to assume the mouse didn't come? Even if you see a mouse come and take chametz, why don't you assume that the mouse ate it? And therefore, you don't have to do bidikah again. Rabbi Zera answers, Amar Rabbi Zera la kashya, ha bebasar, ha belechem. Bebasar la meshayera, belechem meshayera. Says you can't compare these cases because one's talking about bread and one's talking about meat. Regarding meat, the animal, the weasel or the pig will not leave anything left. So there's no tum'ah left at all. Regarding bread, however, it's not that tasty to the mouse. It'll eat most of it, but it'll leave some crumbs. It'll leave some part behind, and that's why if you do see an actual mouse take your chametz to the room, you have to do bidikah again. All right, good. Now, Amarava, Haimai, wait a second, Rava has another answer to this question. Bishla mahatam emor hava emor lahava, vimtim selomad hava emor achalte. Regarding the case of the fetus in the ground, there we have a double safek. We don't know if the stillborn is actually buried. We don't know if that actually happened or not. Right? Maybe they never had that problem. And even if they did, maybe an animal came and took it away and ate it. In the case of bidikat chametz, I saw a mouse come and take it. I know for sure that there was chametz there, and the mouse moved it. And they only have one safek. Maybe it ate it, and maybe it didn't. So have safek uvadai. So in our case, we know for sure that there is chametz that was moved somewhere in my house. That's the vadai. So I have to worry. And I only have a safek. Maybe it ate it, maybe it didn't. And so if I have a presumption of certainty of a prohibition, and then only an uncertainty regarding whether it was removed, that's a problem. So that is the basic principle. So now I'll show you the outline. So we had this question. We have two answers. And Rava's answer is going to be the prompt for the next part of the discussion. The idea is as follows. If I have a certainty that something became asur, and then a certainty that somehow it became mutad, that's good. the heter that's certain will undo the prohibition. And same if they're both a safek. If something became prohibited, but I'm not sure about it, and then another thing that might have happened, I'm unsure about, that would have lifted it off, then those can balance each other out, and I'd be allowed. And certainly in case if there was something that maybe it was asur, and then something happened that for sure it's gone, then it's okay. But what about certainty and then doubt? That is the question. And so far we're assuming that in this case, for example, right, the mouse comes and we know for sure there is chametz. He took the chametz to another room, so that's for sure there's chametz somewhere. So there's that's the chazakah of prohibition. And then maybe he ate it, but maybe he didn't. So that doesn't seem to be enough. So now we're going to quote two cases where we have also a vadai and then a safek, and it seems to be permitted. And that will be a question on to Rava. Okay, so let's see the first one. The first one is about a fellow or chaver who dies and leaves fruit. So let's see the case. Is that true that you never have an uncertainty that can undo something that's a certain prohibition? Chaver shemet. Chaver doesn't just mean a friend. Chaver means someone who is joined a fellowship of trust, that they take maaser and teruma and maaser from their fruit. They're very careful. They even make an oath that they so therefore any fruit that you acquire from a chaver, you know for sure they took teruma and maaser. If he dies, and he had a whole storehouse full of produce, even if he picked them or acquired them that very day, the very same day that he died, you can assume that he took to the ma'aser. In other words, they're so diligent, the very same day that that they acquire them, they're going to take to the ma'aser. Okay, now let's see. That's the source. Now we're going to analyze it. Now we have a definite presumption that when they came at first, they were tebel, because anything that you pick and process and store is tebel, which means that Teruma Maaser was not taken. It's prohibited to eat. So that's for sure. And now the person died. We don't know if he took the Teruma Maaser or not. And yet the Sparaita says it's permitted, and I can follow the doubt, and assume that he did take it. So you see, this is a question on Rava. We have a case of safek that does undo a vadai. So we have two answers. Hatam vadai uvadaihu. No, in fact, this is a case of certainty and certainty. How so? The vadai me'aseri. It's actually a certainty that a chaver fellow will take to the maaser. Yes, for sure it was tebel, and now for sure, even if he died the same day, for sure before he died, he made sure to take to the maaser. Or second answer, safek v'safeku dilma meikara emur de la tebile ke Rabbi Oshaya. There is actually a safek at the beginning. Not everything is automatically tebel. There's a rule. First, when you pick fruit, olives, grapes, whatever, and then you have to, or wheat. First, you have to process it, take the chaff off the wheat, and then you dry it out. You put it into the storehouse, make a pile. Only after you process it and bring it into the house through the front door or into the storage area. Once that's complete, then the prohibition of tebel kicks in. Before that, you're actually allowed to have a snack, have a temporary meal from it. You can feed it to animals, so you can actually use it beforehand. And therefore, there are some loopholes. There are ways to use the fruits and grain without having to give to the ma'an ma'aser, without it becoming table. You can kind of circumvent the system as follows. Ma'arim adam al tivu'ato. You can use artifice. It's a trick. It's a loophole. He's calling it that. It's not recommended. What you do is you take this grain and you bring it into your courtyard or into the barn with the chaff still on it, so it never became obligated to the ma'aseh. And then you can feed it to your animals without having to give the tenth. So you see that it is possible to do that. And therefore, in this case, when this Haveh, we see that he has a whole storehouse full of fruits and grains, maybe he used this loophole and it was never chayav in maaseh to begin with. So therefore, maybe it was tebel, maybe it was not. And even if it was tebel, maybe he already took to the ma'aseh. And therefore, you see, this is a case of safek and safek. Okay, good. So we saw Rava makes a general principle that certainty and then a doubt is not good. We saw one question and we answered it in two ways, that it actually is vadai and vadai, or that it's safek and safek. We're going to ask about a second case, and we're also going to have two answers similarly, just in the other way around, that maybe this is safek and safek, or maybe it's vadai and vadai. Let's see what this case is. This case is also a little strange. Ve'en safek mosimi de vadai v'hatanya. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Maaseh b'shivchato shel mesik echad berimon. There was, mesik is a thug, Jewish mafia guy who happened to live in Rimon. It's up in the Galilee. It doesn't really matter. The point is that his maidservant somehow had a stillborn baby. Either was hers or someone else's, and this maidservant takes the stillborn, sheitila nefel abod, and throws it into a pit. Okay. Now, afterwards, uba kohen vehesisbo leda im zachar hu im nekebahi. Kohen saw her throw something into the pit, and he goes afterwards and looks down into the pit to see if that stillborn fetus was a boy or a girl. Why does it matter? It matters regarding Tuman Tahara. If it's a boy, then that mother would be Tameh for 1 week. If it's a girl, she'd be Tameh for 2 weeks. So I don't know, he somehow knows the mother and needs to guard to tell her what the halacha is. Okay, for some reason the Kohen is looking over to see. Here's the problem: when you have a dead body, if a Kohen hovers over it, right, then he's creating an ohel, and the Kohen becomes tameh. So if there was actually a body there, then the Kohen would be tameh. So now this case came before the Chachamim. Chachamim said the Kohen is tahor. Because there are martins and polecats down in the pit, and surely they would have immediately taken that fetus and dragged it away, and so therefore when he looked over, he would not have seen it. They would not have been there, and we can assume that happened, and the person is tahor. Okay, the word bardelas is interesting because technically it means a cheetah. But we don't find cheetahs around where people live in the bottom of a pit. So it's probably referring to the bet is maybe is interchanged from an M, a mandaris, which can refer to a polecat or something like that. All right. Anyway, the point is that we assume an animal took it away. Now, here's the question. וספק לא גררו השית ההיא שעתה, וכת הספק ומוסים מדי ודאי. Here we have a case where, for sure, this maidservant, she threw this stillborn down and so we know it was there. So there was definitely tum'ah there. And now, that's a vadai. Now, maybe an animal came and took it away, and maybe not at that time when the Kohen looked over. So here you have another question to Rava, because you have a case of doubt that overrides a case of certainty. So two answers. The So actually, think about the case again. We saw her throw something in there, but we're not really sure what she threw in there. Maybe it was actually a stillborn fetus. Maybe it was just something that was similar to it, but maybe it was before 40 days, and so therefore it was not actually something that was tameh. So since we're not really sure, so it's safek and safek. Okay. Now, is that really a good reading? The case was the Kohen wanted to see if it's male or female. So doesn't that mean that it was developed a developed fetus? If you could tell a gender. No, the case is he wasn't even sure if it was developed enough to be such a fetus, and if it was, then can he tell if it was male or female? He didn't know for sure that it was an actual body that would be tameh. So therefore, it was actually safek. That was any tumah there, and then safek, even if there was tumah there, maybe an animal took it away, and that's why it's not a question to Rava, because it's a quick case of safek. Or second answer, ibetema hatam vadai u vadai hu kevan de hoda u bar de las misuyin sham vadai geraruhu behahi sha'ata. In this case, since it's actually a vadai, since for sure there are animals present there on the bottom of the pit, for sure that when there's something comes down there, they're going to take it away. And so that's not even a doubt. The only doubt we had before was, do they eat it totally or do they leave a little left over? Right? That was in the chametz, they leave a little left over. That maybe is a question, but for sure they're going to move it somewhere else. Okay, in parentheses here we have another version which says the same exact thing in different language. Lishna harina nihi devadai chalum lo amrinan vadai geraru lechoraihu amrinan. For sure they, even if for sure we don't say for sure they ate it, but for sure they moved it away. Okay, this is the exact same thing as what happened before. How do we have two lishonot, two explanations? If you look at the manuscripts, you see that manuscripts have some version of this one or some version of the other. But the Yemenite manuscript, which, as we said, is the best one, actually does not have an explanation at all. It just says kevan dechuda badas misuyin sham vadai gerarum. For sure, since there's animals, for sure they took it away. In other words, the rest of it is a later explanation saying why we do assume that they took it away, even though we don't assume that it ate the whole thing. And so this makes sense. Usually when scribes or someone adds in a kind of commentary, they might add it on the margin or something. And there's different versions because it's not an essential part. It's not an original part of the Gemara itself. And so you see the best manuscript does not have that word of explanation. So this happens sometimes. Explanatory commentaries get moved from the margin into the text. And that's why there's so many different versions of that. Okay, good. And all right, now we'll go to the outline and we come to the next set of cases, which is a contradiction from the third Mishnah of our Perek, that where we do worry about a weasel moving something, and we just said that we don't worry about a weasel moving something. And we're going to have two answers, one from Abaye and one from Rava. Okay, let's see the case. Right, in our opening Mishnah, we said that if you have some chametz around, you don't have, and you already checked the room, you don't have to recheck the other rooms. You don't have to worry that a mouse came and took it away. But the next Mishnah says, it says after you do bedikat chametz, right, and you found the 10 pieces, make sure to keep them safe. Put them away, because otherwise you have to worry that someone, right, they'll get lost, a mouse will take it away, and then you're going to have to do another bedikat chametz. You're going to come back the next day and you're going to say, oh no, where's the chametz? So make sure to put it away. Which means that we do worry about mice coming and taking things away. So which is it? We have a contradiction now between these two Mishnayot. He says, no, it depends on when. when you're talking about the night before, in other words, when we actually do bedikat chametz, while you're doing the bedikah, you did one room, you seal it off, you say, okay, I checked that. You don't have to worry at that point that the mice are moving things around. That's what's talking about the 13th, even though we'd actually do it within the 14th. That means that the night before. However, the next day on the 14th, now I have some chametz that I left aside that maybe I'll eat for breakfast, or maybe I'm going to burn it. And in that case, I do have to worry about the mice coming and moving it on that day. Why? What's the difference that the night before I don't have to worry about mice and the next day I do have to worry about mice? So listen carefully. On the 13th, in other words, the day before the time of Bedikat Chametz, there's a lot of food around, there's a lot of bread around, and so the mouse knows that there's a lot of bread, so he knows he'll just eat some bread over here, and then he'll go back into his hole. He's not going to go and save it. On the 14th, however, in other words, the day of Pesach, the day, the day before Leila Seder, then already everything's clean and there's no bread around. And so the mouse is going to notice, hey, there's no bread around. I better save it up and move it to another room and hide it. So the mouse knows, right, that there's no chametz around, and therefore does move it on the 14th, but will not move it on the previous day. Okay, this is interesting. And look at Rava's comment. Amar Rava is very sharp. V'chi chulda nevi'ahi, deyada dahida na arbesad, vela ape ad le'orta, umeshayera umatmara. Okay, this is a fantastic joke. As you know, in Sefer Melachim, there's a famous Nevi'ah whose name was Huldah Nevi'ah. Right? She's the one that checks out the Torah that they find in the Bet HaMikdash. She checks if it's authentic. Okay, she's a very important person. Her name happens to be Huldah. So Rava is making a play on words on her name. What is Huldah? Is this mouse a Navi? Does it know that that you have chametz now, but you're not planning on baking any more chametz until the nighttime, right? That it's gonna steal it. The chametz. The mouse doesn't know what your plans are when you're gonna have chametz and when you're not gonna have chametz. This is interesting because it sounds like they would not have any food around and during the 14th. And vela afe, and they would not bake it until urta, until nighttime. In other words, it sounds like they would bake the matzot that they used for Leil HaSeder. They would bake them at night, right? So that they would be fresh. Until today, there's some people that have the custom. They like to bake matzot, right? Close to Leil HaSeder, and to have them fresh. Okay, so anyway, Rava is rejecting Abaye. He's saying the mice don't know the difference. They don't know that on the 13th there's a lot of food around and they don't have to save it. On the 14th they do. So that doesn't make sense. Rather, he gives a different answer. Ela marava, מה שמשייד יניחנו בשנאה, שמא תיטול חולדה בפנינו, והצריך בדיקה אחריו. The reason why the 10 pieces that you find, you should put them away in a safe space is because maybe we will actually see a mouse take them away, and then you will need to do bidika. The point is, if you don't see, right, our Mishnah is saying, if you don't see a mouse, you don't have to assume that a mouse could have come and taken it away. We don't worry about that. But if you're for sure, you actually see a mouse take bread away, then you do have to worry about it. And so that's the difference between our Mishnah and the next Mishnah. Okay, which seems perfectly reasonable. And we have a Braita, in fact, that backs that up. Right, you did B'dikat Chametz, but you still want to eat some bread. So what should you do? So you should put it in a safe place so that a mouse doesn't come in front of us and take it away, and then you will need to do another bidika. So you do have to worry about actually seeing a mouse. But if you don't see anything, you don't have to worry that a mouse came without us seeing. Okay, good. Or an alternative similar answer. Another case, even if you don't actually see a mouse, if you know that you had 10 pieces, by the way, our tradition to use 10 pieces comes from is very old, right? Because the Gemara is giving examples of if you had 10 pieces of bread. So maybe you had 10 pieces, and then you look the next morning and you say, there's only 9. Well, then you know that something happened, right? A mouse must have come and taken one away. Okay, this is always a problem when you have kids hiding the chametz, and you hide 10, and then you find 9, and the kids don't remember where they put it. So you might want to, if you have little kids, you might want to give some supervision to figure out where they actually hid the chametz. Okay, good. So that now we solved that contradiction from the 2 Mishnayot, and now we're going to get into a couple of very interesting theoretical cases about cases of doubt and uncertainty. And what we do, we're going to see one case of a mouse take something from a majority area and the minority area, and then 2 mice moving things from baskets. Okay, some of these are very famous cases, so let's see. 9 סיבורין של מסע ואחד של חמץ, ואתה עכבר ושקל, ולא ידינן אם מסע שקל, אם חמץ שקל. Let's say I have 9 piles of masa, kosher or Passover food, and 1 pile of chametz. A mouse came and took something, but they look identical. Right? Remember, we saw in those days, if you make a loaf of bread, could be chametz, the masa also looked like lafa bread. So just because you find something and you might not know from looking at it whether it's kosher for Passover or not. And so he comes and takes something and we don't know which one he took. Well, what do we do? Hainu tesha chanuyot. That case will is the same as 9 stores. We're going to see the case in a minute. Peresh. If, however, one piece, there was also 9 things that were kosher, and 1 pile that was not kosher for Passover, and 1 piece separated on its own, and then a mouse came and took that piece and brought it to us, that case would be okay. The first case is not okay. And that's similar to the second case in the following source. Okay, so we can't understand this until we see what they're comparing it to. So let's see, this is the famous case, Ditnan. This says Ditnan, even though we don't have a Mishnah like this. Usually Ditnan refers to a Mishnah, but in fact it's a Baraita. If you look in the manuscripts, you'll see that the printed editions have Ditnan, as does one manuscript, but Munich 6, which is a very Sephardic manuscript, and the Yemenite manuscript say Ditanya, which is fits better. Some others do also have Ditnan. Okay, I think in the olden days they weren't always so perfectly consistent to put Ditnan with the Mishnah and the Tanya with the Baraita. But anyway, the Yemenite manuscript is consistent here. Okay, here's the case. Tesha hanuyot, kulan mochrin besar shechuta, v'achat mocheret basar nebela. Where you come to a street, right, a neighborhood, and you have 9 stores that sell kosher meat, and 1 store that is unkosher. I went out shopping and I bought meat from one of the stores. And then I get home, I said, I can't remember which store I went into. I don't know, I was talking on the phone, I wasn't paying attention. Sifeko asur. So it's not permitted. I don't know if it's kosher or not, and therefore I cannot trust that for sure I don't know which store I went to. So I'm not allowed to eat it in that case of doubt. That's case number 1. However, ubanimsa halech achad hadov. If I was walking in the street, in the marketplace, and I found a piece of meat there, right? I open a package, I see it's a piece of meat. And I look around and I see, well, let me see on the street, there's 9 kosher stores and only 1 that's not kosher. So vast majority are kosher. Therefore, I can assume that this meat that I found is kasher, that it came from a kosher store. Okay, we have I don't know, anybody expert in probability or statistics? I don't know, Isaac, Rachel, can you figure out what is the difference between these 2 cases, right? Why when I go into the store and buy it, I assume I have no idea. It's equal, 50-50. Maybe the store is kosher, maybe it's not. But if I find it in the street, then it's I assume I follow the majority. So it's really not so easy to figure out why this is.
It's the prior on the person, not the object. You're more unsure of yourself than you are. Nobody else is unsure of where they buy their meat but you. And so everybody else is from a kosher store.
Very good.
Maybe you're unsure.
Excellent, excellent. I think you're onto something here. Before I explain what you said, I was thinking of it in a slightly different way. It's kind of like if you flip a coin 50 times, you get 49 times you get heads. The next one, right, is still 50-50 if you're going to get heads or tails, even though you got 49 heads before. So that one, you only focus on this one, then it's for sure, then it's still 50-50. But if you make a list of all the 50 times and you pick one at random, then you follow the majority. In other words, when something separate, when you're in the act, right, it's 50-50. When you look at the bigger picture, kind of separate it out, then you follow the majority. This actually, Halbertau's book deals with this also and shows that then the Tannaitic sources themselves don't make the distinction with the same language that the Bavli does, but rather here it's about a local store versus a marketplace. If it's a local store, then I have a responsibility to go and check and ask the store, where'd you get this from? In other words, I can track where the meat came from. If I didn't and I forgot, I'm still responsible for it. Whereas in the marketplace, there's so much going around, everybody buying and selling, and it's impossible to track. So therefore, when it's not possible to know, because I just found it, then you follow the majority. The point is that in general, you're allowed to follow the majority. But if you had a way and could have been responsible for figuring it out, then you cannot follow the majority. So I think that's similar to what Isaac was saying, right? In one, we're focusing on the person. You went into a store and you don't know what it is. In that purview, it's 50-50. Whereas when you find it on the street, right? I didn't do anything. I just found this. And now I can look at the bigger picture, right? Because we're not focused on the person, but rather on the situation. Yeah. Okay, good. So I think we made some sense of it, but this is very complicated subject, and a lot of other cases too. Anyway, let's apply it back to the case of the chametz. When I have 9 piles of masa, 1 pile of chametz, and a mouse went and took from one of them and brought it to me, that is like a person going into a store and taking one of them. So there it's 50-50. This mouse, just focusing on this mouse, could have taken kosher or not kosher. And so I have to assume 50-50 and I can't eat it. But if already, I don't know, so wind came, whatever, something separated from the piles, and then the mouse came, took from something that he just found, that's okay. That's like finding meat in the middle of the street. And that would be permitted. I can follow the majority. Okay, very interesting. And the last case for today, Shene Siburin. I have 2 piles, אחד של חמסה ואחד של חמס, ולפניהם 2 בתים, אחד בדוק ואחד שאינו בדוק. So I have 1 pile of masa, 1 pile of chametz. I also have 2 homes that are in front of me. One I did bedikat chametz, and one I didn't do bedikat chametz. ועטו 2 עכברים, אחד שקל מסה ואחד שקל חמס. ולא ידינן, הלה היי עיל והלה היי עיל, היינו 2 קופות. And now 2 mice come. One takes from the kosher pile, and one takes from the chametz pile. And the 2 mice, one of them goes into one house, one of them goes into the other house. But I didn't see which mouse went into which house. That sounds like a Dr. Seuss book. And so what do? Can I assume that the one with the kosher food went into the one that I did bidikah? Or do I have to worry that maybe the one with the chametz went into the one that I did bidikah, and therefore I would have to do bidikat chametz again? The answer is comparable to another case in the Tosefta. Titnan shete kupot, achat shel chulin ve'achat shel teruma, lifnehen shene sein, achat shel chulin ve'achat shel teruma. I have 2 big baskets. One has regular food, non-sacred, and one has teruma that only a kohen can eat. And there's also 2 smaller measures, as like 2-3 gallons, and those small measures, one is chulin and one is teruma. And then all of a sudden, one of those smaller baskets fell into the big one, and the other one also fell into the big vessel and got mixed up. But I don't know which one was which. It's permitted. Why? Shani Omer, cholin letoch cholin naflu, utruma letoch teruma nafla. I am allowed to assume that it's the non-sacred that went into the non-sacred, and the teruma fell into the teruma. Why? Why in this case? It seems like it's 50-50. Why do I assume it's okay? It seems the answer is because we have a chazakah. This, a basket is teruma. It's chazakah that everything in there is teruma. When something falls in, it's kind of 50-50. I can stick with the status quo. Whereas, so similarly here, when I have the chametz pile, and the mouse takes one of them, chametz or not chametz, into the one that did bidikat chametz, I can assume the status quo, unless I know for sure, or at least a majority, that it could be a problem. If it's a 50-50, then I can stick with the status quo and say it must be he took the matzah into that room, and it would still be okay. Last line. Emor damrinan shani omer bitruma derabanan. And now we have a question. Are these cases really similar? The presumption in this second Tosefta was regarding teruma. Teruma nowadays is only derabanan. Only when you have a majority of Jews living in Israel is teruma effective deoraita. And so for the time that the rabbis were writing, and today we're on the borderline. I don't know, we might, depending on how you count, maybe we have a majority of Jews in Israel already, or soon. But anyway, when teruma is derabanan, maybe that's why I can be lenient in the case of teruma. But chametz is the oraita. So how can you presume that the mouse with the kosher food, kosher with the matzah, went into that house? It's not the same as the other case. Atu bidikat chametz deoraita. The answer is bidikat chametz is not deoraita, derabanan hi. The truth is that all you need to do is bitul. This is a very important principle. That technically, even if there is chametz somewhere in my house, I do bitul. I say I don't care about that. It's not mine. It's negligible to me. I don't own it anymore. As long as you do bitul, you got yourself out of the deoraita prohibition. And so the only reason we do bidikat chametz is because maybe I might find a roll, I might find a cookie, and then I might want to eat it, and I might actually want it, acquire it. So we're only do bidika as a precaution midrabanan, and therefore actually both cases are derabanan, and therefore they are in fact parallel. Okay, so we saw several different cases of worrying about uncertainty, and this always comes up on Pesach that people are going to check under every drawer, under every piece of furniture, and the question is, how far does one need to go? There has to be some limit in checking for chametz, and so the way the rabbis conceptualize different levels of uncertainty and doubt is extremely important and also very interesting, and we'll see a few more cases of this tomorrow. Baruch Adonai Olam, Amen.